Thank you so very much. What a delight it is to be here, and what an honor to kick off this collaboration that I have with the Civitas Institute. This is an initiative that I have a lot of faith in, a lot of hope in, and I think that this really could show the way for a lot of people around the United States and around the world about what the future of academia really could be. So congratulations to all of you if you're part of this effort, and congratulations to me to be part of it here and to inaugurate a few days every semester for the next few years here in beautiful Texas. I understand why you love it so much, and I'm going to learn to love it too, a few days every semester at very least. I want to talk to you today about what I teach. I teach at, as you heard, at the Harvard Kennedy School. That's my day job. That's my home institution. I also teach, I have a co-appointment at the Harvard Business School. So I'm 50-50, the Kennedy School of Government and the Business School at Harvard. And when people ask me what I do for a living, I say, well, I teach at a business school, Harvard Business School. They say, oh, you teach accounting or finance or marketing or supply chain management or something really practical like that? I say, no, I teach happiness. And they think I'm lying. How is it possible that you teach happiness at a business school? But it's true. I teach 2 sections of 90 MBA students, so 180 MBA students come through my happiness class. I have 400 on the waiting list. I also have an illegal Zoom link they think I don't know about. Right? Their parents are watching it by the 3rd week of class. Why is it that they're so interested in happiness? And the answer is, well, for the same reason that we're all interested in happiness. That's what we want. That's what people want. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about what I teach my students. Now, by the time they get to me for this elective, and the reason there's a lot of competition for this elective, they're in the 2nd semester of the 2nd year of their MBA program. They're getting ready to graduate, and it's starting to occur to them a truth. They came to Harvard thinking that when I get this MBA, I'll get a whole bunch of job offers, which they do, and that's going to make me happy. I want to be happy. The secret of my happiness? Success. And by the 2nd semester of their 2nd year, they're starting to doubt that, and they're starting to feel afraid. They've got fear in their eyes, which is just the way I want them, right? My class is the last chance saloon on the way out of town. So what do I tell them? This is a science class. This is not a woo-woo feeling class. On the contrary, this is about what's going on in your brain. This is what's going on in the psychology world of the science of happiness and actually how you can use it. How do I start the class? I start the class by asking my students, what's happiness? Look, you're taking a class in happiness, you must know what it is. And they put up their hands, or I cold call them. This is what we do at Harvard. It's the reason nobody's happy at Harvard, is because we cold call them, which is to say you pick people out of the audience. I'm not going to do that to you, because this is my first day in Texas, and I don't want to alienate everybody. And I say, what is it? You're taking a class in it. What is it? And they all tell me the same thing, something like you've got right here. Well, happiness is the feeling I get when I'm with the people that I love. Or happiness is how I feel when I'm doing the things that I enjoy. In other words, happiness is a feeling. And I say, wrong. That is incorrect. Happiness is not a feeling, any more than your Thanksgiving dinner is the smell of your turkey. The smell of the turkey is evidence that it's Thanksgiving and something beautiful is happening in the kitchen. If you showed up to mom's house for Thanksgiving, that smell smells so good. And your mom said, take that smell in because that's the whole dinner, you'd be pretty disappointed. And if happiness is a feeling, you should be very disappointed about that too. It should be something more substantial than that. If happiness is a feeling, then it's a vapor. It's something in the ether. It's something that you hope will be visited upon you. And if you slept poorly last night, or you had something doesn't agree with you that you ate at breakfast, or your spouse or partner yells at you, and then the feeling goes away and you don't get it. Well, good news. That's not the secret of happiness, is trying to chase a feeling. You have to be happier, as a matter of fact, you need to stop chasing feelings. You need to start thinking about happiness as something a lot more substantial than that. And good news, I'm going to tell you what it actually is and how you can search for it. If I do my job, I'm not going to give you a whole semester of material, but I will give you the beginning of your own search. And I'm going to give you a bunch of assignments tonight on how you can be happier and you can spread the ideas of happiness yourself. And if I do a really good job, you're going to be telling somebody about this presentation tomorrow. That's the test. Hold me to that standard. So let's see. Okay, it's not a feeling. So what is it? Back to the metaphor of your Thanksgiving dinner. Your Thanksgiving dinner, technically, scientifically, is just a combination of three things: protein, carbohydrates, and fat. That's all food. Those are called macronutrients. That's not very romantic. At your Thanksgiving dinner, you don't ask mom to pass the protein. I mean, you don't talk that way, but the truth is that is the macronutrient profile of all food. It's made up of those three elements. Why do I make that case, or why do I bring that up? Because it's an appropriate metaphor. Happiness also has three macronutrients that to be healthy, you need in balance and abundance. Here are the three macronutrients of happiness. The happiest people have three things and work on these three things: enjoyment, satisfaction, and meaning. Those are the three parts of happiness. If you don't have them, you won't be happy. Now, I've been teaching this for years. I write about this full time. When I go into a company or a family or a college and I meet with people, I can tell immediately what they're missing. I just ask a few questions. And I'm going to help you understand what these questions are so that you can interrogate yourself and find what you need to work on. None of you is perfect across all three of these dimensions. As a matter of fact, almost none of you probably knows exactly what these dimensions are. And that's where the science gets really, really interesting. The science is your friend with respect to happiness, and you're going to see how when I define these three macronutrients, starting right at the beginning, which is enjoyment. Easy, right? Everybody knows what enjoyment is. No, you probably don't. Okay, now, to understand enjoyment, you need a little bit of neuroscience. About 30% of what I teach is neuroscience, and it sounds really imposing and really scary, but it actually isn't. It's interesting and it's useful, and you're going to see why. Now, a lot of people think that enjoyment is the same thing as pleasure. And to have an enjoyable life, you need to seek pleasure. You know, like the hippies used to say, if it feels good, do it. That is the best way to ruin your life, right? Don't follow that. I mean, and a lot of former hippies will say, yeah, spent a lot of time in rehab or something, right? That's a bad idea. Why? Because it misunderstands the nature of how the human brain works. The human brain has basically three sets of functions. This is a concept of the human brain called the triune brain, 3 parts. This is not exact and it's more complicated than this, but it's a good way to understand how the brain works. The first part of the brain, the first set of functions, is often understood as the lizard brain, the least evolved parts of the human brain that we share with the brains of other creatures, including lizards. This is the brain stem, the lower parts of the human brain that get signals from the outside world and regulate autonomic functions. I can walk right now while I'm talking to you and I don't fall down. I can breathe without thinking about it. That's great. I also perceive you. I can see lights. I perceive that there are bodies in seats. All that stuff is coming through the lizard brain. Now that sends signals about the outside world to the second part of the brain, which is the limbic system. The limbic system is a brain system that was evolved over a 40 million year period. We share that with a lot of the other mammals, as a matter of fact. Its whole job is to take the stimuli from the outside world and turn it into feelings. Why? Because the feelings are information. Your emotions are nothing more than information about the outside world that's going to send to your conscious brain so you can deal with it. You know how to act. Now, this is a very important point that I'm making about feelings here. Feelings, cravings, desires, all those sort of animal sensations that happen to you. That's your limbic system telling you something is going on outside. That's all it is. Most people don't understand emotions. My students talk about good emotions and bad emotions. Most people, they want more good emotions like joy and surprise and anticipation and love. And they want fewer bad emotions. What are the bad emotions? Anger and fear and disgust and sadness. That's exactly the wrong way to understand emotions. All they are pieces of information coming out of your limbic system to tell you what's going on. If you have a goal in life of having more good feelings and fewer bad feelings, and you were successful in your goal of getting rid of your bad feelings, You'd be dead in a week. You need bad feelings. They keep you alive. They're evolved. They're amazing, as a matter of fact. Anger and fear, they alert you to threats. That's through a part of the limbic system called the amygdala that signals through your pituitary gland to your adrenal glands to give you stress hormones so that when something's threatening you, you know to act very quickly and very automatically. That's saved your life thousands of times when you're walking across the street or driving your car or anything else. Sadness is important. It's evolved so you will not be just voluntarily ripped from the company of your loved ones. You need to be around the people that you love to have a good life and sometimes even to stay alive. You need all of it. You need disgust. Disgust is something that alerts you to pathogens around you. Something that smells awful, that means stay away from it. It could make you sick. Negative emotions are so critically important. Positive emotions, nice to have. That sweet smile from across the room at a party, it's nice. That frowning face, pay attention, that could do you in outside. That's the reason that our brains reserve more space for negative emotions than for positive emotions, and you shouldn't be trying to avoid them. You should be understanding them so that you can manage them and learn and grow from them. All emotions is information. Back to pleasure and enjoyment. Pleasure is a limbic phenomenon. It's a signal to you saying that's a thing that actually might help you survive and pass on your genes. You see something that looks delicious to eat and you're going to eat it, or drink something, or you see somebody who's incredibly attractive. The pleasure-seeking sensation is something from nature, from evolution, to help you survive another day and pass on your genes. However, trying to pursue that as a life strategy is very temporary and won't lead to happiness. Mother Nature doesn't care if you're happy. Mother Nature just wants you to survive. Hit the lever, get the pleasure. There it goes, it's gone again. Hit the lever, get the pleasure, and it's gone again. People who seek pleasure as a means of living, what do they wind up as? As addicts. Nobody's ever said, my secret to happiness, you know what it is? Methamphetamine. No. The Anheuser-Busch Corporation puts ads on TV. You know what they never feature in their ads? A dude alone in his apartment pounding a 12-pack. Why not? That's how a lot of people use their product. They're seeking pleasure, and that's dangerous and unhealthy. No. The Anheuser-Busch Corporation in their beer ad has these guys and with their friends and their family opening up a Budweiser and having a great afternoon together. Why? Because enjoyment leads to happiness, and enjoyment takes the source of pleasure and adds two ingredients: people and memory. And that delivers it to the third part of the brain, which is the prefrontal cortex. The prefrontal cortex is a bumper of brain tissue right behind your forehead. That's your executive brain. That's the most evolved part of your brain. That's where you make your executive decisions. That's where you decide what to do. That's where you create and call up so many of your memories. That's where you can retain an experience that will consistently bring you greater happiness. That's why when something is a source of pleasure for you, if you're doing it alone, you're probably doing it wrong. You need people and memories across almost all behaviors and substances such that your prefrontal cortex can experience the source of that pleasure, and it can turn into enjoyment, which actually leads you to happiness. You want to know what a problem in your life is? There's a source of pleasure, and you keep hitting it all by yourself. That's a problem. Now, of course, those are the signs of addiction, but the neuroscience behind that is very clear. What do you do to solve that problem? Not necessarily stop doing that. Just stop doing it alone. Do it with people. Now, again, if your thing is drinking and all your friends are drunks, that's not the kind of people to hang out with. But you get my point, don't you? Because you moderate the behavior by turning it into a source of shared fun and even love and making a memory, and that leads to happiness. Now, what have I told you? Something as simple as enjoyment, it requires strategy. It requires work, but understanding this can change your life, right? It can help you avoid mistakes. I wish I had known this when I was in my 20s. So much grief would have passed by me. I would have made so many fewer mistakes with my life. That's why I teach it to 20-somethings. That's part one, it's enjoyment. Part two is satisfaction. Now, satisfaction is the joy of accomplishing something with effort and struggle. That feeling you get when you work for it, you wanted it, it was hard to get, and you got it. During the coronavirus epidemic, which evidently didn't make it to Texas, it certainly was a big deal in Massachusetts, though, where I live, I'll tell you. We were all locked down out in the house, and my little girl, who's now 20, she's a junior at Providence College, but she was still in her senior year, and she was finishing up her senior year entirely by Zoom. It was a horrible, non-learning, sorry excuse for education. And every morning I would come down, and she would be dejectedly looking at the laptop, kitchen table, in math class. Zoom math class, pathetic. And she hated it. I got that. I was very sympathetic to her. Well, one morning I come down during the coronavirus epidemic. My little girl, Marina, is at the kitchen table in front of the laptop laughing. I said, well, obviously, sweetheart, you're not in math class. She says, no, I'm not. I'm actually watching a YouTube video. I said, okay. What's so funny? And she said, I found this video of this really old man dancing like a chicken and trying to sing. And I thought, I want to see that because a guy making an idiot of himself on the internet is right in my wheelhouse because I'm a shallow person. So I come around to look at it, at the old man dancing like a chicken and trying to sing. It was Mick Jagger. She didn't recognize him, right? She didn't, who is this? I said, honey, I realize that you kind of come from an odd family, but this is, maybe the most famous rock and roller who ever lived, singing the most famous rock and roll song, certainly from my childhood, I Can't Get No Satisfaction. That song was number one on the charts when I was 1, and I'm 59. That was a long time ago. This song has longevity to it. She says, why do you people like this so much? You people, right? And it gave me an opportunity to explain. It's not the song. It's a terrible song. It's the message. I can't get no satisfaction. But I try and I try and I try. That's actually wrong. You can get satisfaction. You can struggle for something, and you've all gotten plenty of satisfaction in your life. You did work for it. You wanted it. You got it. It's sweet. The problem is you can't keep no satisfaction, and you never figure it out, right? I wanted it. I worked for it. It's going to be so great when I get it. It's going to be so great when I get it. It's going to be so great when I graduate. I'm going to be so proud of having graduated. I'm going to graduate with honors. It's going to be even better. You're going to really enjoy that for a week. Sorry. Why? Why? Because of a process in the human brain called homeostasis. Homeostasis is the tendency of all physical and emotional processes to go back to your baseline. That's what homeostasis is. So, if you start the day with a little bit of physical exercise, get on the treadmill or something, and you run on the treadmill for half an hour to get your pulse up to 135 beats per minute for proper cardiovascular health, and then you finish and get off, within 15 minutes, your pulse is back to where it was. That's homeostasis. If it didn't, you'd be dead in a week. The same thing is true for you emotionally. You want something really good off your baseline, out of your equilibrium, and you work for it and you get it and it's great, but you always return through homeostasis to your original emotional baseline. That's also true for bad things, by the way. One of the things that people don't understand is like if my beloved breaks up with me, I'm going to be sad forever. You're actually not going to be sad forever. I have the data. It just feels like you're going to be sad forever. Why? Because you don't understand homeostasis. Mother Nature wants you to think you're going to feel great from that good thing forever or horrible from that bad thing forever, so you'll really, really be seeking the good thing or really trying to avoid the bad thing. Mother Nature wants to fool you into thinking that you're always going to feel that way, but you don't because you can't. You got to be ready for the next thing. If you're a caveman in the Pleistocene, walking across the savannah looking for food, and you find these berries on a bush and it gives you great joy, you don't stand there for a week enjoying the berries. You'd be a tiger's lunch. You must actually go back to your baseline so you're vigilant and ready for the next thing. But Mother Nature has to make it so that you never know that. That's why you can't really keep no satisfaction, to quote Mick Jagger, kind of. It's interesting that I've done work on, on the satisfaction that people get when they get rewards at work. My research has looked at this. And for example, I often ask, when you get a bonus at your job, what day do you enjoy it the most? Your boss comes into your office, like, You're the linchpin of this company. This feels so sweet. 40% bonus. What day do you enjoy it the most? That day that you found out or the day it shows up in your check 3 weeks later? The question answers itself. You go home and pop champagne with your friends. I got that huge bonus. They're like, congratulations. And 3 weeks later, it shows up in your check and you go, oh, yeah, that's nice. Why? Because you can't keep no satisfaction because of homeostasis. And you know what? You try and you try and you try, like Mick says, little good old Mick says in the song. Why? Because you want to keep that feeling. That's called the hedonic treadmill. That's a metaphor, obviously. Hedonic means feeling. You want to maintain the feeling by running and running and running, or as Mick Jagger says, by trying and trying and trying. You're trying to get the feeling and keep the feeling, but you can't. It's a tyranny of nature. You must have satisfaction to be happy, but you can't keep it. What a mystery. It's a problem with human life, right? A lot of people have said, well, that's just too bad. That's just too bad. It's elusive. Turns out there's a solution to this. Now, I've been kind of trash talking Mother Nature a little bit here, and I'm going to do that some more. Here's the thing. Mother Nature has only 2 goals for your life and mine. Two only. Survival and gene propagation. That's all Mother Nature cares about. She doesn't care if you're happy. That's up to you. And sometimes to be happy, you got to stand up to Mother Nature. You have to choose a divine path instead of an animal path. And I'm going to give you an example of how you can do that. And this is the path that has been suggested by almost every philosophical and religious tradition for thousands of years, to stand up to Mother Nature. She wants you to get more stuff. You're wired in. You know, there's a formula in your brain for satisfaction that keeps fooling you over and over and again. You know what the formula is? Have more. Have more. And then when you get there and it doesn't last, you conclude, I guess I needed even more. So you run and run and run. And then that doesn't work, so you need even more. That first billion didn't do it, so the second billion might. That's the hedonic treadmill based on homeostasis. And it's a mistaken formula that we get so that we'll stay in the hunt. Well, here's the glitch in the matrix. Here's the way around that stands up to these impulses that are so suboptimal. A better model for satisfaction is not all the things that you have and making them more. It's all the things that you have divided by all the things that you want. Real satisfaction is haves divided by wants. Now think about your high school math, if you haven't had any math here at the University of Texas. I hope you have. But if you haven't, you certainly remember how this works. A fraction can be increased by increasing the numerator or decreasing the denominator, right? If you increase the numerator of a fraction, that's a very inefficient way to increase the total number. A much more efficient way to do it is by decreasing the denominator, and that's the strategy that you need. You don't need to have more strategy. Oh yeah, more money, more power, more pleasure, more fame, more Instagram followers, more everything like that. You need a want less strategy. Do you have a want less strategy? Have you taken an inventory of your wants and slashed through them mercilessly for your own happiness? That's hard. That doesn't feel natural. That works. Your life is like a beautiful work of art, and you're the artist. Now, most of us, we start off our lives with a blank canvas and a set of paints. And that's what you're doing here at school. You're filling up the canvas with brush strokes. It's great. Here's the problem, fellow strivers. By the time you get to, I don't know, maybe your 40s, the canvas is full. You can add more brush strokes, but it doesn't make the painting any better. You don't get more beautiful with more stuff. See, then you need a new metaphor. You need a different work of art that is you. Here's one. You're a sculpture. How do you get to the beautiful sculpture, the perfect sculpture? By chipping it away. That's wanting less. Chip, chip, chip. Get out the chisel. Get rid of the possessions that are haunting you, the toxic relationships that are holding you down, the cravings, the conceits, all of the problems that you have that the world tells you you need. Get rid of it. That's the want less strategy. And when you do that, you get lasting and stable satisfaction. I've worked for the last 11 years with the Dalai Lama. And I asked him for the formula. He said the secret to lasting and stable satisfaction is not to have what you want, is to want what you have. So what's your chipping away strategy? Here's one piece of advice I give my students, my HBS students who are studying for their MBAs. They've all learned that to be properly ambitious, you need a bucket list. You know what a bucket list? You know what a bucket list is? It's on your birthday. It's a metaphor, obviously, of a bucket holding all of your cravings and desires and ambitions. And on your birthday, you list them. Here's what I want to do by the time I'm 30 and 35 and 40. All the things that I've achieved, all these beautiful things I've done, all the cars that I've owned and the places I've seen on your bucket list. And you imagine yourself enjoying all these things. And, you know, there's a kind of a problem with that, which is it inflames the denominator in your satisfaction equation and makes you feel kind of like a loser right here and now. What you need really, and what I have, is a reverse bucket list. Look, I've got my cravings too. I've got my desires and my ambitions and, you know, my worldly idols, money, power, pleasure, fame, sure, just like everybody else. The problem is I don't need them to be limbic. I don't want them to be limbic. I don't want them to be like ghosts in the machine. I want those desires to be migrated to my prefrontal cortex where I can manage them consciously. So I take a list and I write them down honestly. I'm not proud of these things. These are the things that I want. And then I cross them out. Zoop, zoop, in my reverse bucket list. Not because I'm not going to get these things, because I've decided I will not be attached to these things. And it's like a miracle. I'm free. You know, my birthday a few months ago, I thought to myself, what's really my attachment and what's holding me back, right? And I thought about it. I thought about a very famous passage from the work of the Vietnamese Buddhist monk Thich Nhat Hanh, the founder of the Plum Village movement, which is a famous Buddhist set of communities, largely for Westerners. A very wise and wonderful writer. And he said, you know, the greatest source of attachments for most people today is their opinions, right? It's true, isn't it? We're on a college campus here. Holy cow. Get between me and my opinions. That's like getting between a miser and her gold. It's bad. It's bad. And, you know, with these polarization, cancel culture wars that we're all suffering from, where we can't talk to people with whom we disagree, that's because of an attachment to opinions about something like politics. I thought to myself, you know what? That's my problem. My political opinions are too strong. They're weighing me down. So I wrote about half of my really strong political opinions on my reverse bucket list, and I crossed them out. Crossed them out. I need fewer political opinions because I need more friends, right? So do you. And I'm telling you, it doesn't mean I don't believe these things anymore. I just care less. I just care less. You disagree with me politically? Come sit next to me. I love you. I want to hear what you have to say. What did it do? It took them out of the realm of my limbic system, put them in my prefrontal cortex where my CEO brain is in charge. Now somebody says something I really disagree with, I'm like, interesting point. Because I made the decision to put the line through the magnitude of the opinion. And that was important to me. And you can do that for whatever it is that you need to chip away in your life. That's number 2. That's satisfaction. Now the hard part. You know, that part was hard. Now it gets complicated. That's what I told you just a minute ago. Meaning. You can go a long time without enjoyment. You can. People can. I've gone months, maybe years of my life occasionally not getting proper enjoyment. You can defer your satisfaction because you're hard workers. You can defer your gratification for lots of things. You know, it's good. But you can't go a day without a sense of meaning. The why of your life. If you don't know the meaning of your life, you will be at loose ends and unhappy. As sure as I'm standing here, this is true. And a lot of you are worrying about this. I know you are, because people are. Especially, by the way, people in their late teens and 20s today who don't have a strong sense of life's meaning. Now, how do you find it? What is it, and how do you find it? The definition of life's meaning is actually not that simple. Like everything else, to say, what's the meaning of life is almost a cliche. Like I should go, sit on the top of a mountain talk to the guru or something. What's the meaning of life? And he'll give me one sentence that sums it all up. It's not like that. There's not one simple trick on the internet that helps you find the meaning of life. No. This is a multidimensional problem. Philosophers and psychologists will define meaning as actually a three-dimensional problem. It turns out everything is multidimensional in this framework because the science of this is not uncomplicated, psychologically, neuroscientifically, or even philosophically. Meaning has three parts. The meaning of your life involves coherence. Things happen in my life for a reason in a particular way. You have to have a theory of the case. Maybe it's because God wills it, and maybe it's because it's the nature of evolution, but you have to have an explanation for why things happen the way they do. That's coherence. You need that. Number two, you need purpose. Purpose is the direction of your life and the goals in your life. Your life has to have a directionality to it. It has to have an intention to it. Right? There's a really important concept in sailing. If any of you like sailing, I don't know much about sailing, but it's called the RUM line, R-H-U-M, RUM line. And that's the directionality of the place you're trying to get to. You need that. You need that sense of purpose. You need that navigational course in your life. If you don't have it, you'll be off course all the time and maybe going in circles. And last but not least, you need significance. You need to believe that it matters that you're alive. It matters that I'm alive. Now, which of these is a crisis for you? I can actually kind of boil this down into a two-question quiz for you. If you're feeling a little empty, if you're feeling a little aimless, I'm going to ask you two questions, a little exam. And if you don't have convincing answers to your own satisfaction of these two questions, you know you have a meaning crisis. Now, that's good news. Why? Because then your vision quest is to go in search of the answers to these two questions. Okay? You don't have to go search of all kinds of, I don't know, maybe a new religion, maybe a new way of thinking, maybe a new place, maybe a whole new culture. No. You need the answers to two very specific questions. This is what you need to go in search of if you don't have answers. So I'm going to give you the quiz now. Answer these things in your mind. These are not politically correct answers you give your mother. These have to be real answers that are really written on your heart. Okay? Question number one. Why are you alive? Why? That can mean two things. How did you get created, or what are you supposed to do? Or both. Second question. This gets harder. For what would you be willing to die today? Anything? Do you know? A lot of people don't. A lot of people don't have good answers to those questions. And you see it when you ask people, they hem and they haw, or they say something that's really pat and it sounds kind of good. You know. And you know if you're struggling with those questions right now. Now, I have 3 adult kids. I talked to you about my little girl, Marina, who's now 20. But I have 2 sons who are older, 25 and 23. That means I have 3 kids. It means I have a middle child. And you know what that means? That's a problem, usually. My middle child is a son named Carlos. Carlos is a piece of work. Carlos was my problem child, right? And, during high school, it was always the same thing. The headmaster's office is calling. He didn't show up for school today. Carlos is flunking math. Carlos is getting a D in history. Carlos might not graduate on time. I mean, it was just maddening, the performance issues, constant performance issues. And finally, my wife, who's just such an optimist, she says, at least we know he's not cheating. It was the worst. But here's the problem. He wasn't even having fun. He was miserable. He was aimless. Why didn't you go to school today? I don't know. What do you mean you don't know? He didn't know why he didn't go to school. Okay. So all my kids, they have to do this thing when they're in high school, in their junior year in high school. All 3 of my kids, I made them write a business plan for their lives. See, they're entrepreneurs. You are entrepreneurs in the startup of your life. You're the startup entrepreneurs. You're the enterprise creators of the business of you, right? For my kids, they're entrepreneurs of their lives, but I'm the venture capitalist of their life, right? And if I'm going to invest, I deserve a business plan, and it better be good. Okay, fair is fair, right? So this is what happens when your father teaches at a business school. Okay, and so they got kind of used to it. And when Carlos's time came to write his business plan, I sent it back for 6 rounds of revisions. It wasn't original. It was like, yeah, well, I'm going to go to college, and I'm going to go to college. No, you're not. I said, no, you're not. Don't lie to me. You're not ready for college. Now, I have credibility in this. I'm a college professor for sure, but I wasn't ready for college. I made it through 10 months of college. before I was invited to pursue my excellence elsewhere, right? Dropped out, kicked out, splitting hairs. And I went on the road as a classical musician. I was a musician all the way through my 20s. I actually played in the Barcelona Symphony for a bunch of years. I played on the road with a jazz guitar player named Charlie Bird for a couple of years, all the way through my 20s. I was a professional musician. It was kind of living the dream. In my late 20s, I went back and I got my bachelor's degree by correspondence, graduating a month before my 30th birthday. I have credibility when I tell you you're not ready for college, son. He knows. Why? Because I'm Carlos too. I got a Carlos inside me. It's not great. It's not great. So I sent it back for revisions and said, try harder. Convince me. How are you going to find the answers to your questions? Then he gave me a version of the plan that really made a lot of sense. He said, I think I can find the answers to my questions by working hard with my hands outside by myself. Tell me more. He took a job as a dryland wheat farmer in Grangeville, Idaho. Not some hobby farm for yuppie kids. It was a real 8,000-acre wheat farm. And he picked rocks out of the soil because he was low on the totem pole. He fixed fences. He drove a combine 16 hours a day, made a bunch of money, did it for 2 seasons. And then he wanted a phase 2 of his personal business plan. He joined the Marine Corps. Right? Okay, 19 years old, joins the Marines, goes through basic training. Basic training in the Marines is also known as not fun. From there, he went into the infantry training battalion. And from there, he did the in-doc for a special operations unit called the Scout Sniper Platoon, which was hardest of all. Today, my son, 4 years in the Marine Corps, 23 years old, is Corporal Carlos Brooks, Scout Sniper Platoon of the Marines 3-5 out of Camp Pendleton. This is a scary job. Yeah. It's a scary job for me and his mom, right? When I suddenly can't track his phone, super fun, right? But he found the answers. By doing these hard things, by demonstrating to himself why he's alive and what he's willing to die, he's found the answers. Today he's 23 years old, he's married. He's got it going on. And I ask him, hey, Carlos, give me your answers. Why are you alive? Because God made me to serve. For what are you willing to die today? For my faith, for my family, for my fellow Marines, and for the United States of America. Boom. Great answers for him. Not your answers, necessarily. Not my answers, necessarily. I'm so proud of him. But I'm more than that, I'm happy because he finally found a way to understand the meaning of his life vis-a-vis those 2 questions. What are your answers? You have them? You're ready to go on a quest and do something hard to find them? I promise you, it will be the adventure of your lifetime. That's number 3. Now, you didn't expect 3 simple little things to yield so much that's actually based in the philosophy and science. But this kind of raises the next question, doesn't it? Which is, how is it that, back to the metaphor of the dinner, I could give 2 of you the same Thanksgiving dinner and one of you would pick up more weight than the other after eating 6,000 calories? Why? The answer is because any 2 of you have different metabolisms. Metabolisms for food are based on basically 3 things: your genetics, your circumstances, and your habits. Those are the 3 things that affect your metabolism. Same question. How is it that 2 people can have the same macronutrient profile for their happiness and one person always seems happier than the other? There's a lot of that, right? You know those people who are ebullient and joyful all the time? Just so annoying. I don't get it. I don't get it. Well, it turns out there's a metabolism for your happiness as well. Now, the reason I'm going to tell you about this is, number one, it's interesting. You're going to learn something about yourself. But more importantly, this is going to yield the most important information of the evening that you're not going to forget, which is the happiness habits portfolio. The 4 things you're going to need to do every day if you want to maximize your happiness across the 3 dimensions I just talked about. Okay, so here is your happiness metabolism. By the way, I didn't mention this. You know how the hippies said, if it feels good, do it? I remember my dad hearing that for the first time in the late 60s, and he's like, that's the end of America. He was kind of right. Anyway, today, if there's a motto for a lot of young people, is if it feels bad, make it stop. If I'm suffering, it means I'm broken and need treatment. No. I mean, my students, they suffer from a lot of anxiety and depression. And they'll ask me, they say, Professor, I think I need to get treatment. And I'll say, look, you're at Harvard. If you're not anxious and depressed, then you need therapy. I mean, come on. Life is tricky. And I get it. Anxiety and depression clinically are a really big deal. But the truth of the matter is you're going to suffer. You have two choices. You can run away from it and try to treat it and block it out, or you can learn from it and grow from it and understand that a full life has this. And that's where you find your meaning, because when you run away from your suffering, when you refuse to experience your suffering, you don't experience meaning. And that doesn't actually block out your unhappiness. That blocks out your happiness. You need to be fully alive. Okay, back to the metabolism question. Metabolism for food is genetics plus circumstances plus habits, and that's exactly the same metabolic system that we have for happiness. So let's start with genetics. 50% of your baseline moods, where you tend to sit at all else constant, is genetic. Now, this is very depressing, I realize, right? Here's how it works. We know from identical twin studies, where identical twins were separated at birth and adopted into separate families. This was not a social science experiment that was cooked up by some, Harvard evil genius. This was actually happened because of circumstances. And then they were reunited at age 40 and given personality tests all voluntarily. And it was a very beautiful thing. A lot of these identical twins didn't know they had identical twins. And you can see some of these films on the internet. It's really lovely and really great. But the psychologists were there with their clipboards taking personality tests. Why? Because when you're a carbon copy of somebody else, but you've had different circumstances in the way that you were raised, I can use very simple statistical techniques to figure out what part of your personality on every dimension is genetic and what part is circumstantial, what part is environmental, I should say. Turns out that almost every part of your personality is between 40 and 80% genetic. Your extroversion, your agreeableness, your neuroticism, your openness to different experiences, all kinds of tendencies, your tendency to be more or less honest. A lot of that is genetic, as a matter of fact, and also your happiness. Your happiness is about 50% genetic at the baseline, how you generally speaking feel without interventions. That is amazing. Your mother literally made you unhappy. But that's not bad news. That's not bad news. Here's why. Another 50% in the literature is that your tendency toward alcohol abuse is 50% genetic. Okay? Now, if one of you came to me and said, hey, Arthur, I got this issue. What's your issue? My dad drinks too much, and my mom drinks too much, and all four of my grandparents were kind of, sort of drunks. I guess I'm going to be an alcoholic. And I'd say, no, that's wrong. I have a special secret technique that can turn the dial on your genetics from 50% to 0. Here's the special technology. Don't drink. In other words, if you know your tendencies, you can tailor your habits. But you got to have knowledge of you. This is why it's so critically important for you to know you. Because if it turns out that there's no problem in your family, you can relax. My family has a lot of problems with alcohol. I don't drink. That's why. I don't want trouble. I don't want to walk through dangerous streets at night. I don't want to drink alcohol if a lot of people in my family have had alcohol abuse disorder. Why? I know my genetics. I've tailored my habits. I'm living a better life. That means habits are everything. Okay. 2, circumstances. Circumstances at any given time. Happy circumstances make you happier by 25%. Unhappy circumstances, bad luck, lowers your happiness by 25%. But here's the thing. My students and most people believe that circumstances are everything. My students think that 10 years from now, they're going to be much happier than they are because good things are going to happen to them, and they are. They're going to get good jobs. They're going to make good money. They're going to start their families if they want to start their families. But here's the problem. Homeostasis. Circumstances temporarily bring you up or bring you down, but it doesn't last, and so you shouldn't pay attention to it. You shouldn't worry about the circumstances in your life because it won't permanently change your happiness or your well-being. Now, it's so hard to do that. All we do all day long is pay attention to our circumstances. Make something better. Get into the city that I want to live in. And make sure I'm around the people that I want to be around and have the experiences that I want to have. No. It's all temporary. Here's all you need to do. Get your habits right, and you'll have systematically better circumstances, and then let the chips fall where they may. And that, once again, is about habits. If you get your habits right, here's the best news of the day. 25% of your happiness is under your direct control if you have good habits. And it will give you systematically better circumstances, so indirectly another 25%. And you can manage your genetics, which is another 50%. All you need to worry about is your happiness habits. You need a portfolio of the happiness habits. Good news, I'm going to give them to you, right? Now, I can give you 10,000 of these. That would waste your time. They're all marginal. Should you do resistance training or cardio? Doesn't matter. For happiness. Doesn't matter. Should you eat broccoli or asparagus? Doesn't matter. I could find a study because that's how we get tenure. Is studies, right? But that's not helpful. It turns out that when it comes to the happiness habits that matter, there's only 4 you need to remember and 4 things you need to do every single day. 4 investments that you need to put into your happiness 401k. Okay? Here's what they are. You need to invest in your faith, your family, your friends, and your work. These are the big 4. Now, it's not that simple because nothing I'm saying tonight is that simple. I have to explain what I mean by that. And let's start with faith. It's very easy to misunderstand that I'm telling you that you got to follow my faith. I'm a Roman Catholic. It's literally the most important thing in my life. It's at the center of everything that I do. But as a social scientist, I will tell you that for the happiness benefits, that's not the point. The point is you need something in your life that transcends the psychodrama with you starring in it, right? If you're left to your devices all day long, here's where your inner narrative is going to go. My breakfast, my classes, my commute, my friends, my money, my parents, me. It's just so boring. It's like you're watching the same episode of the same television show over and over and over again. You're binging the same episode over and over again, which is tedious, and yet you can't take your attention away from it. There's only one way to do that, and that is to zoom out and make yourself small. How do you do that? With a serious concentrated effort at wisdom, at faith, at spirituality, at philosophy, and there's a lot of ways to do that. I have a friend who lives right here in Austin. His name is Ryan Holiday. He's sort of the world's leading expert in popularizing Stoic philosophy. He writes lots of books about the Stoics. He would say that the best way to do this is to read the Stoic philosophers every day, and he's right. It's fantastic. Do that. Zooms you out on your littleness. You need to get small so that you can have peace and perspective. Another way to do this is sort of meditation practice, where you have perspective on yourself. Another way to do this is to walk in nature. I recommend before dawn with no devices for an hour every day for a month. Your life will change. Why? Because you're getting perspective. You're zooming out. Or maybe you should study the fugues of Johann Sebastian Bach and stand in awe of the great genius, the so-called fifth evangelist. There's lots of ways to do that. My way is to practice the faith of my youth, the center of my life, the joy of my life, the love of my life, really. And what does it do for my happiness? It makes me realize the perspective, give me proper perspective on who I am, which is little. And I need peace. And you need to do something like that too every day. What's your thing? Find your thing. 2 is family. That's my family, by the way. I didn't just surround myself with 7 beautiful actors. That's my sons and my daughter, Marina, and my daughters-in-law, and my little grandson, Joey, and these are the most important people in my life. I love them so much. But here's the weird thing about it. I didn't choose them. It's mystical. They were chosen for me. Now, I understand the neuroanatomy of this set of circumstances. I understand the neurochemistry of why I have this strange mystical feeling about them. There's a neuropeptide in the brain produced endogenously called oxytocin. Most of you have heard of it. Oxytocin, aka the love molecule, that it just explodes in your brain when you see your loved ones. You make eye contact and touch. By the way, one of the reasons that social media is so deleterious for our society is because you don't get any oxytocin from it, and you're lonely, and so you binge it, and you get lonelier because you have less and less oxytocin. It's like getting all your meals at McDonald's. It's the junk food of social life, is Zoom and social media and all the ways that we interact without eye contact and touch in real life, because we want oxytocin. We're starving for oxytocin. So I understand the neurophysiology, the neurochemistry of how this thing works, but it's still a miracle, you know? They say you get the biggest bolus of oxytocin when your child is born and you lay eyes on your child. And I remember that when my first son was born, my son Joaquin, when he was first born, it was like, It's like the 4th of July inside my head. And even my little girl, Marina, that you see here, who's adopted. I adopted her when she was 2 years old, and I went to China by myself, and they put this squalling, disoriented infant, toddler, into my arms, and she grabbed my shirt with her little fists and looked up, and boom, it's the same thing. And every time she comes home from college, it's the same thing. You cannot convince me that's not magic, that's not mystical. It's so beautiful. And I didn't choose it. It's chosen for me. Here's the worst statistic in my field. 1 in 6 Americans today is not talking to a family member because of politics. Contemplate that. Would I give up this for somebody belonging to another party or voting for the wrong dude? I don't care. I refuse to care. And you should too. There's only one reason to have schism with family, and that's abuse. Differences of political opinion are not abuse. Do not deny yourself happiness. And if you have been, make it better. You need it. 3, it's friends. Now, a lot of you have friends. If you're in college right now, this is statistically when you're most likely to have a lot of your closest friendships. People my age, on the contrary, they tend to be very lonely because friendship is something that requires practice. We have a great Surgeon General in the United States, a doctor by the name of Vivek Murthy. He's written a book called Loneliness, and he says that's our biggest epidemic. It's not the coronavirus, and it's not gun violence, and it's not climate issues. No, none of that. Loneliness, and you find that loneliness has been rising for decades in this country. Part of it has to do with technology. Part of it has to do with migration patterns, and part of it just has to do with a culture that's fraying at the edges. But here's the thing. People my age will often say, no, I have tons of friends. I don't know why I'm so lonely. Here's why. Because people my age, and even some people your age, have a lot of deal friends, but not very many real friends. I work with very successful people. They know, and you know, the difference between deal and real, right? And if you're wondering, by the way, deal friends, they're useful to you. They're very useful to you. Real friends are useless. Do you have enough useless friends? I don't mean worthless friends. I have those too. And if you're wondering, take a piece of paper and take the 10 people that you talk to most frequently and put an R or a D after their names. That's not for Republican and Democrat. That's real and deal. If you've got too many D's, you need to start getting some R's in there, and that takes work. And people my age are unwilling to do that work. It's like, I don't know, I haven't talked to that guy in 30 years. Talk to that guy. Since I've done this work, by the way, it's changed my life so much. I have 2 really, really close friends, and I talk to each one of them for an hour a week on the phone. That is costly to me. I'm on the road all the time doing this kind of stuff. And he was calling actually when I was in the green room, and I call him tonight when I get back to my hotel, my friend Frank in Atlanta. Talk to him an hour a week because he's my real friend, and I'm not gonna let that go. I am not gonna let that go. Neither should you. And last but not least is your work. Now, as an economist, I've studied different kinds of jobs. What kind of work brings the most joy? Is it for-profit or non-profit or government sector? Is it above average income or below average income? Is it college educated, not college? None of that matters. Blue collar, white collar, doesn't matter. Only 2 things predict joy that comes from work. The 2 things are earned success and serving others. That's it. Earned success means you're creating value with your work in your life, with your life, and in the lives of other people. And you can actually see that, and you're rewarded for that accomplishment. And service to others means that you can see that people actually need you. The essence of human dignity is being needed. And the best way that we can do that ordinarily is through our work. Okay? Those are the 2 things to look for. And if you're an employer, which I talk to all the time, I go to companies and teach this stuff, make sure the people who work for you earn their success and know that they're serving other people. These are critical. If you don't have these things, you're going to hate your job. If you do have these things, you might wish you made more money, and you might wish that you actually could get off your feet from time to time, but you're still going to love it. Because this is the internal reward that we actually need. This is meaning in action. This is the great Lebanese poet Khalil Gibran put it, love made visible. Work is love made visible when you earn your success and you serve other people. So let's sum up. I've talked for a long time, and I apologize for that. I gave you not a whole semester, but a non-trivial amount of this. Here's what I want you to remember, some takeaways. Number one, you can be happier. You can't be happy because that's not the right destination. That would mean getting rid of your negative feelings and you'd be dead. Getting rid of your negative experiences, which means you wouldn't grow. You need to suffer too. So happiness is not a destination, it's a direction. My co-author, Oprah Winfrey, calls it happierness. That's the goal, okay? You can get happier, but you've got to do the work, and the work starts with understanding, and it's not simple, okay? If you're willing to do the work, you can get happier. Two, if you want to, you need to pay attention to three things: enjoyment, satisfaction, and purpose, and diagnose thyself with respect to your weaknesses and be honest about it. Right? Now, each one of those things means don't get stuck on pleasure. Make sure that you're going all the way to enjoyment. Make sure that you're managing your wants, not just your haves. And as important as anything else, make sure that you have answers to the two questions. Why am I alive? For what am I willing to die? Third, managing wants, not just haves, is one of the hardest things that we can possibly do. You need a strategy for it. Fourth, look for opportunity in your suffering. Don't eradicate your suffering. Look for opportunity in it. And if any of you wants, when we have question and answers, I can give you suggestions on very practically how to do so. 5, walk a transcendental path. I invite you to walk any transcendental path. I invite you to walk my transcendental path. I'm happy to take you on that transcendental path, but walk some transcendental path. 6th, you need real friends, not just deal friends. You got too much deal in your life, you'll be successful, but you certainly won't be happy. 7th, earn your success. Serve other people. Make that the focus of your work. And last but not least, if you want to remember this, and this is my appeal to you, make me not the only teacher of this in this room. Now, I have a laboratory at the Harvard Kennedy School called the Leadership and Happiness Laboratory. The guy who runs the laboratory is Reese Brown. He's over there standing up on the wall. If any of you wants to know more about my lab, you can ask Reese about it, how you can get involved and learn about our stuff. Here's the whole point of that lab. Everybody should be a happiness teacher. We train people to be happiness teachers. That doesn't mean you've got to go get your PhD and suffer like I have. I've suffered a great deal. I don't recommend it necessarily to you. It means that everybody can learn more, and everybody can share the ideas, and everybody can embed these technologies in what they're doing, whether they're leading a family, or leading a company, or they're working in a community, or whatever they happen to do. Use this and consider yourself a happiness teacher. Now, here's the benefit. Other people will get much happier. You will get more popular. You will be the most interesting person at your next dinner party. I promise you. Hey, I heard this lecture on happiness. People will go like, whoa, what'd you learn? Because everybody wants to be happy. But here's the most important part. When you teach it, you won't forget it because it's no longer limbic and it will be in your prefrontal cortex. Installed in your prefrontal cortex, you own it. It's in your library. You'll call on it for the rest of your life. Be a happiness teacher. We have lots of resources on this. We have a website, I think maybe even yes. We have a website. If you go to that, see how modern I am? It's a QR code, right? I have no idea, and I didn't make it. So, I'm old. You go there, and you can actually go to the website, and there's all kinds of resources that you can avail yourself of, even teaching resources that you can share this. But if you do me the favor and actually try to explain this yourself for your own sake, and for the sake of the world that we all need today. Be the solutions to the problems that we're all looking at with such great sorrow, and make them into an opportunity for something that much better. God bless you, and thank you. Thank you. All right. We've got time for a little bit of Q&A. So we've got mic runners, and they're going to choose. That way I'm not...
Hi, my name is David. I'm a PhD student here, and thank you for...
What are you studying?
Political theory.
Good.
History of political thought.
Good, good.
Thank you for a very thought-provoking lecture, and I want to return to your turkey analogy. So one of the things that I was thinking is the turkey, yeah, it's protein, carbs, and fat, like you said, and it's not just the smell and so on, but the turkey can be tastier or less tasty.
Right.
And your entire talk, it seems to me, kind of doesn't really provide, or at least, and I may have misunderstood, but it doesn't seem to me there's a hierarchy of better and worse lives as long as we fit the criteria you described and we do the things you advise us to do. And there's lots of good advice, and I'm happy to follow a lot of it, but it seems to me I can think of someone following this advice and having a less meaningful and less happy life than someone else following the same advice and reaching for a more fulfilling kind of thing. And
Mm-hmm.
it relates also to when you talked about homeostasis, it made me think that happiness is perhaps an activity, not just a pursuit, like something you have to do
Mm-hmm.
that you consistently do that makes you happy as well.
Yeah, no,
I
for
was just
sure.
wondering if you kind of
Yeah.
if you view it as different strokes for different folks, or if in your mind there's a kind of
Mm.
hierarchy of the ways in which one ought to fulfill these.
Yeah, no, that's
All the
it's
different
a
ways.
it's an absolutely fair question, and the way that I do it is not necessarily, David, the way you should do it. The point is that this is an outline. This is not a perfect recipe. This is an outline. This is the contours of what the happiest life looks like, and then actually figuring out how you do that. For example, I mean, I go to Mass every day. Maybe you meditate every day. That's your thing, I've got my thing. But the point is you need a thing. That's what it comes down to. The contours of it actually provide the general strokes of what we're trying to do. And then the real work comes from inventing your own scheme within these particular contours. I'm completely convinced that everything I've told you today, you need all these things. But I can't tell you how to do them. I can't tell you how to do them within what you like and who you are and what your background actually is. I do know in point of fact that if you skip these elements, these investments in your 401k, something's going to be missing from your life. I'm persuaded utterly by the data. How you get them? I mean, I don't know what your family looks like. I mean, you have to have 2 sons and 1 daughter and 1 grandson so far, and you have to live in Needham, Massachusetts. Like, no. That's not it. That isn't it. But family relationships, the mystical bonds that we actually have, that is a real thing. I just don't know what that is for you. And if you tried to do it in my way, it wouldn't be good. It wouldn't be as good. So that actually talks about this. Now, the second point that you make is really really adroit, which is that it's an activity. It's active, right? It's active. It's a funny thing, you know, that humans only actually get happier when they're making progress, including progress toward getting happier. Ironically, it's kind of an elliptical phenomenon. Getting happier, making progress toward happiness is in itself happiness provoking. Humans are made always for progress and not for arrival at anything. There's a really interesting body of literature that makes this point, that there's a $40 billion industry that has a 95% failure rate. It's the dieting industry, 95% failure rate. What's the deal? And it's actually, it's a pretty interesting phenomenon that losing weight is not hard, but keeping it off is almost impossible. Why? Because you get a reward every day for progress, and you're willing to forego a lot of the stuff you like to eat because you see a difference in the scale. But once you get to your target weight, your reward is you never get to eat anything you like for the rest of your life. Congratulations. That's awful. That's terrible. Nobody likes that. That's why people either tend to keep dieting and wind up with an eating disorder or go the other direction. Right? That means it's sort of the whole thing is misbegotten. The whole thing is a pathological formula that misunderstands what we're trying to do. So figuring out a way that you can your life is a pilgrimage toward happiness, is walking on a pilgrimage, is walking the path, seeing your whole life like that winds up being the best way to actually see your life. And to say, I'm not going to find the destination, I'm not going to get there, I'm just going to get closer. I just want to get closer. And every day is a learning experience in its own way, whether it's a good or a bad day, a little bit better than the day before it. Then that is a meaningful way actually to see life, and that's an active life. Thank you for those great questions.
Yeah, thank you. As you were describing happiness as an action, I remember the musical You're a Good Man, Charlie Brown.
Huh?
There's a song called Happiness. I only remember the first line, which is happiness is finding a pencil, pizza with sausage, telling the time.
Yeah.
Anyways, my question is twofold. One, segue from the diet question or point, I noticed in the 4 happiness habits, fitness wasn't up there. Does that score high relative to the other 4 or higher than the other group? And question B, now that you've given us this presentation, do we still need to buy your book?
So question 2 is a self-answering question. Of course, it's yes. So look, I say that on behalf of Oprah Winfrey, not me, because that's just the way I was raised, right? So I get the fitness question a lot, and I'm a real fitness fanatic. I mean, I'm in the gym an hour a day every single day, no joke. Why? It's not because of my happiness. It's because of my unhappiness. Here's what I didn't tell you about because we didn't have time. Happiness and unhappiness are not opposites. They're largely cognitions processed in different hemispheres of the brain, and they can coexist in very high amounts. There's a test you can take if you go to my website, called the PANAS test, the Positive Affect, Negative Affect series. That talks about the intensity of your native emotions. There's 4 kinds of people in equal quarters. People who have intense positive and intense negative emotion. These are people who experience a lot of happiness and a lot of unhappiness very intensely. There are people who are intensely positive and weakly negative. The first type, this is me. Intense positive, intense negative. That's the mad scientist profile. Right? The next is intense positive and weak negative. That's the cheerleader profile. Everybody wants to be that. Right? You can have intense negative and weak positive. That's the poet profile. Right? The melancholic poet. And you've got the low or the weak negative and the weak positive. That's the judge. The sober, unflappable judge. Those are called low affect people. Now, why do I bring this up? There's 2 profiles that are high negative affect. Those are the mad scientist and the poet. What does fitness do? It does not raise your happiness. It manages your unhappiness. That's what fitness does. It is one of the best single self-management techniques for people who have high negative affect. So here's the interesting thing. If one of you says, it's like, I know I should go to the gym. I know I should go to the gym. I know I should work out more. I can't stay on a workout schedule. It's because you're not a high negative affect person, and so you don't feel that much better when you don't work out. All it is pain with no gain. That's how it feels. Now, you still should, by the way, because you'll live longer in your happy little world that you got going on, right? Right? But this is the point. Why am I in the gym every day? It's not because I'm trying to look like I'm 20. God knows. It's because I'm tired of the high levels of negative affect, and it's the best way that I can actually live a really good life, is what it comes down to. That's where fitness comes in. Now, in the affect balance, which is kind of positive minus negative, and yeah, makes you feel better. But when you break it apart and look in a nuanced way, what's really, really going on in your brain, that's what's going on in your brain. And that's why it's not a happiness strategy. It's an unhappiness strategy. And that's a whole different talk. As we say in Seattle, where I grew up, that's a whole nother talk. Thank you for that. Yeah.
Hi, thank you for a fascinating talk.
Thanks.
I'm reading Aristotle together with David, who's behind me here. So I have another Aristotle-inspired question.
Good.
Which has to do with this idea that happiness involves challenges and big challenges and challenges that require you to exercise and develop virtues. And it seemed as if you were going in that direction when you were talking about satisfaction.
Right.
And then you started talking about the Dalai Lama and wanting less, and satisfaction had to do with the proportion between what you want and what you have, which might suggest you have the most satisfaction if you don't want anything.
Right.
And you're just smelling the flowers. And those sound like 2 completely different recipes.
Okay, that's a good point. So Aristotle and most philosophers would say that we need challenges that will strengthen our character and bring us virtue, et cetera. And by the way, your grandmother said that too, right? I mean, it's common knowledge, it's common sense. It's not on the satisfaction dimension, it's on the meaning dimension. That's where it really is. You know, we need these challenges that make us grow as people. And if you try to avoid these challenges, even these painful challenges, you don't understand the meaning that is at the essence of the virtue that you're trying to create as a person. The virtue exercises are helping you answer the questions that I talked about. So it's really on that super important meaning thing. This is the reason that it's so bad to try to, people always say, I just want my kids to be happy. No, I don't want my kids to be happy. I do. But I also want them to be unhappy. I want my kids to suffer. I'm not kidding. I really do, because they're not going to. There's a saint, a Catholic saint from the 3rd century, Saint Irenaeus, who said the glory of God is a person fully alive. A person who's numbed to challenge and pain and sacrifice is simply not fully alive and will not develop as a fully alive person. So that's really where that's coming in. The satisfaction dimension, at least the way that I've defined it, and again, people differ in the way that they talk about these things. This is a schema that I think really kind of works. Really what we're talking about is what's the answer to your why questions? And that comes from the really hardest parts of life. Thank you for that.
Amazing speech tonight. Thank you.
Thanks.
How do you deal with having a terrible family? If
Yeah.
that's one of the 4 things you're supposed to have.
Yeah. So you don't have to have a terrible family to, turn this into a question that we all cope with, which is an imperfect family, right? If you don't have an imperfect family, you're fooling yourself. Of course you have an imperfect family. And we all have regrets, and we all have freighted relationships. And regret is a good thing because you learn from the past and you ruminate temporarily on something and you can actually correct and make progress. But I'll tell you my own personal regret, my own biggest personal regret. When I was in my 20s, I didn't spend very much time with my parents. I was living in Spain. I was doing my thing, but I had super interesting parents. My father was a PhD mathematician. My mother was a professional artist. They were creative, intellectual people. I always thought, man, I want to get to know them as an adult, But I got time. But I didn't have time. They died young. They died. Okay, so what do I do? What do I do? Is that whole dimension gone? The answer is no. I learned from that. I don't let my kids out of my sight. I talk to each one of them on FaceTime every day. Much to their chagrin sometimes, right? I'm not helicoptering them. I want them to suffer, right? I don't call the dean when my daughter's having trouble at college. But I want them close. I'm going to live close to them. We're scheming ways that we can live together. I create incentives like a house at the beach that makes them want to be around me, notwithstanding my character. Why? Because I learned from the source of my regret. I learned from it. And now my family has transmuted from the people who died to the people alive. And that's the most beautiful thing of all. Now that's my family. And I take the source of my regret and turn it into a source of learning. And that source of learning has led to my virtue, and it's led to a bigger sense of meaning, and it's helped me to form and mold the relationships that are most meaningful to me in my life.
All right, hi. My name is Arvin. I'm a first-year undergraduate studying economics.
Good.
And so I wanted to ask, so one of the parts of meaningful work is people seeing tangible benefit for other people through their work.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think it's a pretty broad spread sentiment in the American working class that their work isn't doing anything. They're not helping anybody by their work. And so there's two parts of this question. One is, as a worker, how do you reconcile with the fact that maybe your work isn't doing anything? And as an employer, how do you reconcile, how do you tell people, how do you inform people that their work is doing something, that their work means something? So from a worker perspective and a managerial perspective.
Yeah. Okay, so it's a good question because a lot of people feel like their work isn't helping anybody. It's not true that their work isn't helping anybody. Our responsibility is to look for the way that our work helps other people, and our responsibility as those in authority is to help them see that. And again, this is not just, you're working at 7-Eleven and you feel like it's a waste of time. Actually, at 7-Eleven, it's a lot easier to see how you can help other people than it is in a lot of jobs. I've given people a lot of advice. For example, they feel like drones in an office in cubicles. How can you actually turn that into a source of service? Here's an idea. When you're feeling most desperate and alienated from the work that you're doing, remember that work that you're doing is in conjunction with a bunch of other people, almost certainly. Get up at, 2 o'clock in the afternoon, when people are starting to fall asleep after lunch. And go to the break room and get a big fresh cup of coffee and bring it to the person in the next cubicle and say, you look like you could use a fresh cup of coffee. And and I hope they drink coffee. And look at the expression on their face. You turned into somebody who serves somebody else in the smallest but most meaningful way. And then what'll happen is it's just like this, you get this burst of rewards, emotional but neurochemical rewards. I can explain it to you, but you understand it, don't need the technical explanation. And then you want to do it again. And then you become the person that actually does that. And then your job is one of service, including the people who are most proximate around you. Now, sometimes people have really fancy jobs and they feel like they're doing nothing. Before I was teaching at Harvard, I was the president of this think tank in Washington, D.C., and we did lots of very esoteric, very technical research, right? Stuff that humans, white papers called like Wither Yemen. And it's like, the future of the tax code, stuff like that humans don't want to read, right? And I remember there was a team of people that was doing this project on bank deregulation. Bank deregulation. I almost fell asleep as I said that just now, right? And I remember one guy on this team Ryan Streeter is, where's Ryan? I don't know where Ryan is. Okay, there's Ryan, yeah. So he's a mutual friend of ours, a guy named Peter Wallison, was doing this work on bank deregulation. And he was just ebullient about his bank deregulation. And I'm like, what's wrong with Peter, right? Is Peter not get out enough? I mean, what's the deal with Peter, right? And so I finally, why are you so joyful about this bank deregulation research? And he says, because I'm wiping out poverty. What? I said, what do you mean? I said, give me more. And he said, what's the main reason that you have intergenerational poverty in America today? And I was kind of struggling to kind of give a coherent response. And he said, let me help you. It is inadequate access to fair and equal credit. He says, if you're born in a middle class or upper class family, you can use your money twice. You got the money that you got, and you can borrow against it as collateral, and you get twice as much. People don't get that when they're poor because they can't get credit. If they do get credit, it's unbelievably expensive with a title loan or a payday loan or maybe not even paying their electric bill. And it costs an average 3,000% rate of annualized inflation to get it of an interest to turn it back on. He said, you know the main reason for that? I said, I think you're going to tell me. He said, yes, I am. It's red tape and bureaucracy that's discriminatory against the poor. I'm wiping out poverty by slashing through useless, needless banking deregulation that helps the powerful and hurts the poor, and that gives me joy. You get the point, right? You got to look for it sometimes. Look, maybe you don't agree. I think he's right. And the point of that is that he actually found the answer, and it gave him this great joy that there was some little girl that was not going to be poor like her parents and grandparents were because she was actually going to have access to laws that didn't discriminate against her, and that's how we do it. Thank you for that. Okay, we got one in the front. I promised. Over here, can we come to the front? And I committed to a question. I apologize. That was outside my purview. Yeah.
I noticed when you walked on stage tonight, you did the sign of the cross.
Yeah.
I mean, you answered the importance of faith. Is it a mindset for you as you walk on? I mean, that was the curiosity for me.
So you noticed, obviously it's not a hidden thing. I'm not like belonging to some secret society. The Roman Catholic Church, AKA the largest nonprofit in the history of the world, with a lot of the pathologies of nonprofit organizations. So I cross myself when I come on. The reason is because I dedicate my work to God. I dedicate my words to God, and I ask God to speak through me, because that's part of my faith. I'm a Christian man. And that's what I believe that I'm supposed to do, and that's what actually sustains me in this, and this is what gives me joy. This is not about me and doing it well or doing it poorly for my own edification or lack thereof, but because I think this is a message that's coming through me from my Creator, from my Savior, as a Christian man. And so I dedicate it. And the nice thing about being a Catholic is you can physically dedicate it on your body as you're coming out. That's one of the great blessings of the sign of the cross. There's a little bit of foray into Catholic esoterica, but I hope that was useful to some of you. Thank you for that. All right, yeah. We got a mic? Yeah.
So as a psychologist who works with entrepreneurs, I love your idea, your metaphor that we are the CEOs of our own lives.
Yeah.
And when I work with founders or really with people, when I try to convey that message, I actually call it the builder's mindset. So I also really love the framing, building our lives for ourselves. I find that there's this tension between, okay, if you really want to follow my advice, stop following my advice.
Right.
That it's really easy to convey a lot of prescriptions, a lot of kind of convenient, template-y formulas, recipes. Here are the 3 ingredients. Now go pursue these ingredients. And now a person starts to slavishly follow my template and my recipe. And no. But no, now I'm building your life. No, you build your life.
Right.
And so I'm curious about kind of the role of, first principles thinking, the role of this kind of is there a meta ingredient that is something like, like an independence of judgment, of epistemic integrity that kind of gets all of this off the ground?
Yeah. Now, if we had a lot of time on this, because it's such an interesting question, I would turn back to David and ask David to answer your question.
Ooh.
Right? Why? Because David is going to answer this question with respect to there's the contours, but then you actually have to fill out the contours, much in the same way that I teach my entrepreneurship students, right? I teach my entrepreneurship students, learn this, look out for that, don't make this mistake, and now go do your own thing. But you asked something in the end that was even broader, which is what's the meta truth behind all this? And again, I'm not going to do the one weird trick, don't eat bananas or whatever you read on the internet, right? But there is something that is the one meta truth here. The thing that we really all want, that is the fuel behind human happiness. and the source of and the sustenance behind which we actually make this pursuit. There's a 85-year longitudinal study that's been conducted at my university back to the late 1930s. It's called the Harvard Study of Adult Development. This started among students that were in their sophomore year in Harvard in the late 1930s. It had a whole bunch of famous people in the study, like John F. Kennedy was in the study. The Boston Strangler was in the study, right? They didn't make it to the end, but a number of them are still alive. Now, it was matched up. Pretty soon, people figured out, even in the 30s, that this was not a representative sample. All Harvard dudes is not a good representative sample across the population. So they matched it up with other men that were born at the same time that didn't go to college. And then they actually spread it out to their wives and partners and their kids, and it started to become, representative in socioeconomic status and gender and race. And now, after 85 years, it's a treasure trove of all the things people have done over an 85-year period and how they wound up, right? And so the guy who ran it, there's only been 3 directors in 85 years. This is a lot of stability in this thing. One of the guys who ran it for over 30 years, his name is George Valiant. He's a psychiatry professor at the Harvard Medical School. He said basically, look, there's a lot of stuff that's out of your control. If you're gonna be happy and well, happy and healthy when you're 85, there's a lot of stuff that's out of your control. Don't pick depressed parents, for stuff like that. It's like good advice, thank you very much. But he said there's 7 things that you can actually do. 7 things that you can actually do that are kind of related to what we talk about, but a lot of it's common sense. That if you're gonna be unhappy and unwell, if you get the drinking, smoking, fitness, and diet wrong, okay? And it's all common sense. None of it's outlandish. There's nothing weird about it. It doesn't say eat kale. It says basically eat a sensible, balanced diet, get moderate exercise. Walking is best, right, interestingly. Don't smoke cigarettes, or if you do smoke cigarettes, quit, because it's 7 in 10 chance that a lifelong smoking addiction will kill you of a smoking-related illness. And they're very hard over on alcohol. Very hard over on alcohol, because the data just don't support the idea that alcohol is good for you in really any amount, is what they say. It shows that, again, you can get away with it, but it's in spite of the alcohol, not because of the alcohol, that your life is really good. And they find that most relationship disillusion happens because of substances. Hugely disproportionate amount of divorces, for example, happen because of that. Okay, fine, you all knew that. Now it gets to the interesting part. He says, every single person needs a strategy for dealing with stress. Life is stressful. You need your strategy. Maybe it's therapy, maybe it's meditation, maybe it's your faith, maybe it's journaling. You got to get your thing, okay? That sounds an awful lot like the faith philosophy part. You need to be a lifelong learner and have an active mind. You don't need to go to Harvard or UT, but you need to read, learn for the rest of your life. And last but not least, this is the one that blows everything else out of the water. You need relationships. You need to love. And he's asked, how do you sum it up? He said, how do you sum it up? Happiness is love, full stop. Look at the four happiness habits. Love of the divine, love of your family, love of your real friends. The apex of friendship and family is your romantic life, is a stable relationship with your spouse or partner. And last but not least, it's love of everybody as expressed in the way that you earn your daily bread. Love, 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 and more love. The meta concept, what we all need, what we all want, what we all must pursue, and we must not block out, is the love in our life. That's the secret to happiness. Thank you.